Too excited. Welcome, friends, to Uncle Henny's Campfire Stories, a live stream I'm doing in part because we all need something to watch. And I gotta be honest with you guys this week, I'm pretty stoked because we did this last week as just kind of an experiment, a goof, and we ended up having like 2 hours of a ton of fun. I mean, an immense amount of fun. And I've been thinking about this the entire week leading up, and I want to also say that, since the whole coronavirus thing and all that stuff has happened, waiting for the clock to strike 8 to come here and read stories with you guys legitimately gave me butterflies, and I haven't had much in the way of butterflies in the last 3 weeks. So, for those of you who are new to the program, I will hang out in the chat, talk to you guys a little bit, reads from, right now we're doing more super scary stories for sleepovers. I'll read a story from that, chat with you guys a little bit more, read a little bit more, and we'll hang out till around 10 p.m. Eastern. So, what's going on in the chat? Hi, my friends. Wow, there's a lot of you guys. Thank you so much for hopping in, guys. So, and also, I'm attempting to create a perfect campfire ambiance. I hope it's working for you guys. I hope the campfire sounds aren't too loud. I also, I even keep my water in this, but you can pretend it's hot cocoa. It's called immersion. So, anyway, hello, Craig Cohen. I caught you out of the corner of my eye. Hello, Nathan Makeley. Hello, Rebecca Randolph. Hello, Morgan Moore. Hello, man, there's so many of you guys. I'm so flattered you guys are coming to hang out with me. So, before I start the story, I want to mention, you'll see these little links on the bottom of the screen. Those are for tips via PayPal or Venmo. They are not in any way required. They are just appreciated. I'm currently mostly out of work right now, so I appreciate it. But what do you say, friends? We get to the first story and jump back into more super scary stories for sleepovers. I'm going to assume you all said yes because I see the chat room goes delayed. So we're going to read this story. I want to mention all of the stories are relatively family friendly, like Adam's family friendly. They're not Manson family friendly. They're Adam's family friendly. So and after I'm done reading, I'll be happy to join you guys in the chat and have a talk. So let's see, where did we leave off? All right. This story is called Bungalow 14. The sign at the edge of the highway read, "No facilities next 100 miles. There's a gas station just up ahead," Stephen's dad pointed out. "We better stop and fill the tank." He turned the family van off the road and eased it next to a bank of gas pumps in the shade of the station overhang. Stephen's mom opened the passenger door, then turned in her seat to face him and his older sister, Liz. "I'm going to use the restroom, and I think you two had better do the same. It looks like we won't be able to find a motel until we get close to Albuquerque." "Oh, great," Liz grumbled. "Just what I wanted to hear. I get to spend another 2 hours cooped up in the back seat with my darling brother." "Well, excuse me for living, Your Highness," Stephen shot back. "Please," their mom said, rubbing her forehead with her fingertips. "None of us wants to spend any more time on the road than we have to, so let's just try to make the best of it." She slid out of her seat and slammed her door. "Great work, Liz," Liz complained, frowning at her brother as she, too, got out of the van. "Me?" he protested. "You started it. Why do I get blamed for everything?" Stephen hopped out and slid the door closed. Feeling for change in the pockets of his jeans, he scooped out a couple of quarters. He bought an icy cold soda from the station vending machine, then walked to where the blacktop of the gas station bordered on the endless expanse of desert beyond. Shading his eyes, Stephen looked forward to the far-off mountains, wondering what sort of secrets they might hold. The landscape in between was mile upon mile of pale sand, dotted with dried brush. A black ribbon of highway sliced through it. In the distance, the road appeared to be flooded by a lake of rippling blue water, but Stephen knew it was only an illusion, a mirage caused by the unrelenting heat. He felt the sun-baked ground sizzle beneath the soles of his sneakers. Kicking a pebble into a knot of parched brush a few feet away, he froze. From within the meager shade of the brush came a dry, rattling sound, followed by swift movement. Stephen recognized the long, slender body of a rattlesnake. The startled creature drew itself back in a tight S-curve, with its triangular-shaped head lifted in defense above the sand. Stephen knew that the head was shaped to accommodate the deadly venom glands. He also knew not to do anything that would alarm the animal more than he already had. Rigid with fear, his head pounding, Stephen waited until the rattlesnake silently withdrew. "Whoa," he gasped and retreated to the safety of the van. "Dad!" he yelled. "You won't believe this!" His father was talking to the station attendant and held up one hand to quiet his son. With a sigh, Stephen climbed back into the vehicle. His sister was reading a magazine. "Liz," he said excitedly, "I just saw a rattlesnake. It was only a few feet away." "Good thing it didn't bite you," she said with a nasty grin. "It might have gotten sick." Stephen scowled. "Yeah, well, I scared it away by showing it a picture of you." "That's enough, you two," Stephen's dad ordered as he got back into the driver's seat. "The attendant told me that there's a small motel just off the main road a couple of miles from here. It isn't fancy, but he said they always have vacancies. What do you say we stop there for the night and get some rest? It might improve everybody's mood." "That's a great idea," Stephen's mom said with a smile. "As long as the room has a shower and a bed, it's fancy enough for me." The turnoff wasn't far, and a few minutes later they pulled into a dusty parking lot. A sun-bleached red pickup truck was parked in front of one of the rooms. The motel was made up of 3 single-story adobe buildings, painted the same lifeless color as the surrounding sand. The units were arranged around a central court with a swimming pool that was empty, aside from some tumbleweeds. "The attendants didn't exaggerate about it not being fancy," Stephen's mom commented, "but it's better than nothing. Let's go see about getting a couple of rooms." The door to the small motel office was open, but there was no one at the desk. "Anybody here?" Stephen's dad called out. Then, noticing a bell on the counter, he tapped it several times. A door opened at the rear of the room and a tall, slim man in jeans, a faded denim shirt, and a cowboy hat stepped inside. Stephen noticed that his well-worn boots appeared to be made of snakeskin, but it was what the man wore around his neck that really drew his attention. Hanging from a short strip of leather was the skull of a rattlesnake with its ivory white fangs exposed as if ready to strike. "What do you folks want?" the man asked in an unfriendly tone. "A couple of rooms," Stephen's dad answered, "just for tonight." "I don't think I have anything right now," the man said flatly. Stephen's dad looked surprised. He motioned to a board behind the desk that contained 14 hooks. A key hung from each of them except the last 2. "But it doesn't look like everything has been rented. I don't understand." The surly man folded his arms and leaned across the registration desk. "We're doing some, renovations," he replied. "Most of the rooms are unavailable. You're better off driving into Albuquerque." "Look," Stephen's dad said firmly, "my family is very tired. I don't know what the problem is, but we're willing to take just about anything. Can't we at least see the rooms?" "Of course you can," someone said from behind them. Stephen turned to see a tall woman standing in the doorway. He couldn't help but stare at her strange, yellowish eyes. They were almost hypnotic. "Sam," she said in a scolding manner, "don't be so unneighborly. Bungalows 5 and 6 are all freshly made up. I'm sure these folks will be just fine in them." The man seemed suddenly nervous, perhaps even frightened. I think we have enough guests for tonight," he offered hesitantly. "Sam," the woman said with a trace of irritation, her eyes glittering, "fortune has provided us with more. We really must get them settled before dark." With surprise, Stephen thought he saw the skull that hung around the man's neck move slightly. Sam's eyes appeared to glaze over momentarily. The man shuddered, then reached for 2 keys. "Suit yourselves," he grumbled, handing them to Stephen's dad. "That guy is really weird," Stephen declared once he and his sister were in their room munching on sandwiches his mom had supplied from the cooler in the van. He popped the last bite of his sandwich into his mouth. "Hey, do you want to check this place out?" he asked, his mouth full. "It's still light enough." "No thanks," Liz answered as she flopped onto one of the twin beds. "You can be Mr. Explorer if you want. I'm too tired." "You're such a drag," Stephen griped, heading for the door. "Tell Mom and Dad I'll be back in a few minutes." Once outside, he examined the empty pool and parking area, and began to explore a shallow ditch near the roadway. From his vantage point, he had a clear view of the entire motel. He watched as the strange woman he had met earlier left the office and strode purposely towards the last bungalow. The sun was just beginning to set behind the mountains, streaking the sky with red and orange, but even in the failing light, he could make out 2 or 3 slender, sinuous shadows on the ground that seemed to be keeping pace with her. Are those snakes? He thought out loud. Nah, even pet snakes don't follow people around, he thought. It must be a trick of the light. The woman looked up toward the darkening sky with an odd smile that even from a distance gave Stephen an uncomfortable feeling. Then she hurriedly entered the bungalow. A soft, cooling breeze began to sigh across the desert. Stephen trotted back toward the building, then prowled along the cracked concrete walkway that ran the length of the motel, stopping to peek into the front windows of each room. They don't look like they're being renovated to me, he muttered. In bungalow 13, he saw an older man stretched out across one of the beds. He appeared to be sound asleep. An empty and half-empty liquor bottle stood on the nightstand. The last room was bungalow 14. Unlike the others, the drapes were pulled tightly across the unlit window, kindling Stephen's curiosity. He crept up to the door and carefully tried the knob, but it was locked. He put his ear to the door. At first, everything seemed quiet, but as the last rays of sun disappeared, he thought he heard something stir inside. There was a slight rattling noise that sent a chill down his spine. Suddenly, the door slammed at the motel office, and he scurried back to his room. Now what? Liz complained as Stephen raced into the motel room, locked the door, closed the drapes, and peeked out like a fugitive. Have you done something to get in trouble again? Shh, Stephen hissed. I'll tell you in a minute. Still breathing hard, he watched as the thin man from the front desk, Sam, strode purposely to the bungalow 13 and went inside. He came out again, holding up the elderly man Stephen had seen there earlier. Together, the two shuffled towards bungalow 14. Sam fumbled for the key, opened the door, and guided the old man inside. After a few minutes, Sam reappeared, alone. He stopped, leaned against the wall, and put his face in his hands. Then he walked slowly back to the office. Seconds later, the garish orange neon vacancy sign flared to life. Stephen turned to his sister. There's something strange going on here, he said. Something very strange. You're strange, Liz said sleepily. Turn out the light, will you? I'm exhausted. Stephen flipped off the overhead light and sat for a while in darkness, watching to see if anything more happened in bungalow 14. But there was nothing. Finally, he stretched out on his own bed and fell into a restless sleep. In his dreams, Stephen found himself alone at night in the middle of the desert. He called for his parents, but the only answer was the plaintive cry of a coyote. Then he began to hear other sounds, sounds usually beyond the human senses. He heard the soft footsteps of the desert mice scurrying in the brush, the smooth clicking noise of a scorpion preparing to strike, and the slithering of snakes crawling across the warm sand, searching for prey. The snakes seemed to be everywhere. Frightened, Stephen began to run up a sand dune, but he kept slipping down, unable to reach the top. Then, all at once, he noticed a reddish glow coming from somewhere behind him, and he turned to see a huge bonfire. Dozens of people appeared, dancing around and leaping across the flames. The people were dressed in flowing robes that looked as if they were made from impossibly delicate folds of snakeskin. The skulls of the rattlesnakes, just like the one Sam wore, hung from cords around their necks. And there was something else, too. In his dream state, Stephen could sense an immense shadow of a long, slender body drawn into a tight S-curve hovering over him. He could feel the steady, hypnotic gaze of its horribly familiar yellowish eyes. It was something dreadful and powerful, something secret and older than the ancient desert itself. Then, in the flickering firelight, he saw his parents surrounded by rattlesnakes. The huge shadow moved toward them as the buzzing of the serpent's warming rattles became louder and louder. He knew they were about to strike his parents, but Stephen couldn't move. He tried to scream, but no sound came out of his throat. He tried again, and "Yeah!" he screamed, sitting straight up in bed. Liz squealed and fumbled for the light. "What is wrong with you?" she yelled. "Are you out of your mind?" "Mom and Dad, we've got to warn them!" Stephen shrieked, racing to the door. "Warn them about what?" Liz yelled, but Stephen didn't stop. Somehow he was sure that his hideous nightmare was going to come true. When Stephen and Liz got to their parents' room, the door was unlocked. Stephen dashed inside. He couldn't believe it. Their parents' bed was empty. "Mom! Dad!" he screamed again, bolting out of the room to the van just outside. He pounded on the windows, but his parents were nowhere to be found. "Where are they?" Liz sobbed, growing panicked herself. "The office," Stephen gasped. "Maybe they're there." The kids ran barefoot across the courtyard. The office was open, but deserted. Liz followed him back outside. "Look," Stephen pointed, but by the eerie glow of the vacancy sign, he could see that the door to Bungalow 14 was standing open. Slowly, trying to control his ragged breathing, Stephen walked toward it with Liz on his heels. Somewhere in the back of his frantic mind, Stephen registered the fact that the ground was covered with dozens of serpentine tracks leading toward the bungalow. He stopped at the threshold and reached in to snap on the light, but nothing happened. "Mom? Dad?" Stephen called. "What should we do?" Liz murmured. Stephen motioned for her to follow him, and the two moved cautiously across the floor into the darkened room. Stephen abruptly touched something with his foot that made him stop, but in the darkness, he couldn't tell what it was. "The drapes," he whispered to Liz. "Open them." He heard her footsteps and the sound of her fumbling with the drapery cords. Suddenly, the drapes swept open and the center of the room was filled with a dull orange light. Stephen's heart pounded rapidly. At his feet, he recognized the lifeless body of the old man from Bungalow 13. Two others lay nearby in the shadows. He didn't need to look to know they were his parents. Terrified, Stephen glanced at his sister. She was gaping at the man on the floor, her face frozen in horror. "This isn't real," she moaned. "It's just a terrible nightmare. I'm going to wake up and be home in bed." "We've got to get out of here," Stephen cried, lunging toward her. "I think not," a deep voice hissed from a shrouded corner of the room. Stephen backed closer to his sister as the huge creature slithered into the unearthly light, blocking their escape. Instantly, Stephen knew it was the shadowy figure from his dream. "What is it?" Liz stuttered, paralyzed with fear. The being had the body of an immense rattlesnake, but there was something slightly human about the scaly face, something very familiar about its yellowish eyes. "Now that you are here," the thing hissed, "I insist that you stay. I am in command of powers you cannot comprehend, powers that were already ancient when this desert was still young. But I need your life force. My continued survival depends on it." Stephen took a step to one side, and the creature struck at him, its long fangs bared. It reared back and struck again, missing him by inches. It was toying with him. All at once, a dark figure appeared in the open doorway. It was Sam. "Do something!" Stephen shouted to the man. "Help us!" "That weak-minded fool cannot help you," the creature whispered viciously. "He will do as he is commanded." "I told you to leave," Sam answered sadly as he turned away. "You had your chance, but..." His voice trailed off as he walked outside, closing and locking the door, forever sealing in the sounds of their screams. By the time Sam reached the office, the cries had stopped. He leaned wearily against the wall for a moment and looked out at the first signs of the coming dawn. A dusty station wagon turned off the road, rolling to a stop in the motel parking lot. While his family slept, a tired-looking traveler stepped from the vehicle and walked toward the office, the vacancy sign gleaming in the early morning gloom. That was a good time. Oh man, did you guys get a kick out of that? I need a cup of water real bad. Boy howdy. Let's see what you guys are thinking. Gasp, snakes in the grass. Shane Migliavaca, yes, yes, yes. Nathan Makeley said, "Hey, my daughter says hi." Hello. Tony Marr said, "Yes." I love the yeses. Raymond Brown, "Just walked in the door with my laundry and some food, had to cover the car and didn't miss much. Rattlesnake." Damn right. Darn right, pardon me. Ray Cersei searches for inhaler. So I guess you guys got a kick out of that. I'm glad. I'm really glad. That was a fun one. Real quick before we get to the next story, I mean, other than, reading the chat, please, if you're watching this and having fun with it, just hit the share button and put a little comment about how much fun you're having hanging out listening to some scary stories, and maybe some of your friends will want to join us. It really helps a lot to get people listening if you just hit that share button. So please consider hitting share. Right about now would be the perfect time. And of course, I will mention it once every break. Tipping is appreciated, but it is not required. But we do have tipping options right here for PayPal and Venmo. So, but did you guys get a kick out of that story? I'm amazed how much I still get a kick out of stories that were for when I was a kid, for lack of a better term, when I was a child. Because that story, I mean, I don't know how many of you guys read these books, the Scary Stories for Sleepover books, which, by the way, if you guys are wondering, hey, Henrik, how long is this going to go? I mean, not tonight, but in general, like, how many times are you going to be doing Uncle Henny's Campfire Stories? I hope you know I've got 2 entire other scary story books at least. So keep that in mind. Oh, and we just got our first tip of the night from Rob Fields. Thank you so much, Rob, for your very generous tip. By the way, Rob, I do a podcast called Weekly Spooky, which is not a family-friendly podcast, but it is a horror story narration show. And this week, if you go to weeklyspooky.com, you can listen to me narrate one of the stories Rob wrote called The Rest Area, which is a really fun romp involving a maniac with an axe that I find really entertaining. Jeff Berkman, will there be mashed potatoes? Tony Marr, this is awesome. Thank you again. Thank you, Tony, for not only tuning in, for not only, supporting, but also just showing enthusiasm. One of the hardest parts about all of what's going on right now is the fact that there's not a lot to look forward to. And I don't mean that to be negative, but like, I used to look forward to, going to the movies on Tuesday nights. I used to look forward to, hanging out with friends on the weekend. And I have a projector. I put up a big projection screen and watch movies. All of that is, it's on hold. And getting to hang out with you guys and read some scary stories. And my heart is melted by I've gotten more than 4 or 5 comments now from people saying that they are watching and listening with their children, and that it's soothing and it's fun for them, and it means the world to me. I love doing this. It's a lot of fun, and I intend to do this for weeks on end, at least until social distancing ends, and then I probably will still do it here and there if you guys want to watch it. So, Sean DeNoyers joined the group. Thank you for coming. John Oak Dalton said, here for the blue gels. Well, there is one blue gel. So, also, if you guys are curious about anything involving this program, other things I do, if you ask any questions in the chat, David DeNoyer, who is helping me run the chat, will comment with links like he just commented with the Weekly Spooky link. So, Raymond Lawson said, my goosebumps have goosebumps. Well, that means it's working. So, anyway, I think we'll go to another story, but I do want to again mention, please just hit that share button, but make sure, put a little comment in there about how much fun you're having, or what the show is, or whatever. Tell people why you like the stream. Let your friends know that they're missing out and they should come and hang out with us, because we're all sitting around a campfire, and it's totally a campfire. This is not just my photo studio and a special light, and my dog is not, well, my dog is sleeping right at my feet right now. Henwolf is out cold. I wish I could show you, but the camera is, it's a one-man show, social distancing, there's no crew. So anyway, I think it's about time we go to another story. Crystal Berry said, my older kids will love anything kid-friendly and spooky. Well, feel free to not only let them watch this, but also when this ends, if you go to my page, you can find a replay of it, or it's on my YouTube channel, which you can always message me or comment in the chat and ask for my YouTube channel. Every episode of Uncle Henny's Campfire Stories will be on YouTube, archived for your enjoyment. So, all right, my friends, while you guys are clicking share and telling people that you're spooked, I am ready to go to the next story. This story is called The Gift. Rebecca slowly spun the globe in her dad's office until it turned to the outline of Southeast Asia. She ran her finger down the Malay Peninsula and stopped at the southern tip. Singapore, she said, liking the way it sounded. Aunt Evelyn sure is lucky to get to go there. Her father looked up from the computer screen at his desk. She goes wherever the magazine sends her, he commented. It's her job. Rebecca's Aunt Evelyn was a journalist. She wrote about all kinds of faraway places, but, best of all, whenever she went somewhere, she'd send wonderful souvenirs to Rebecca. So what did you get this time? Her dad asked. Rebecca looked at the small package in her hand. It was wrapped in brown paper, and there were 2 rows of foreign postage stamps in the upper right-hand corner. I don't know yet, she replied. She'd been savoring the little package ever since the mail carrier had brought it 15 minutes before. Finally, she slipped her finger under an open seam in the paper and ripped it open slowly. Inside there was a note and something wrapped in coarse tissue paper. Rebecca pulled away the paper. Oh, wow, she exclaimed. It's cool! She held up an ivory white hair clip. It was carved into a delicate spray of curling leaves and exotic flowers. That's lovely, her father said, admiring the gift. Rebecca opened the note and read quietly for a moment. It's elephant ivory from Africa, she announced finally. Aunt Evelyn says it was carved in Hong Kong and she found it in a little shop in Singapore. She says that you can tell that it's real elephant ivory because it has a tiny, light diamond pattern that you can see on the back. Flipping over the clip, Rebecca examined it closely. There it is, she said, walking to the mirror. She held the clip up against her dark hair. I can't wait to wear it to school on Monday. You are so lucky, Sandy said with envy when Rebecca showed off her gift to several of her classmates at school. You're always getting stuff. True, Rebecca said smugly, but this is special. It's made out of real elephant ivory, which is very hard to get. There's a reason for that, Tanya said softly. Oh, really? Rebecca said with a scowl. Tanya was new in school. Sandy had kind of made friends with her, but Rebecca didn't like her and didn't mind showing it. And what do you know about it? Tanya looked at the others. She hesitated, searching for the right words. I've heard that lots of African elephants die because of poaching and that the sale of ivory has been banned. Your gift is really pretty, but... What's poaching? Crystal interrupted. It's what people call it when the elephants are killed illegally for their ivory tusks, Tanya explained. The tusks are sold to make all kinds of things. Like hair clips? Sandy asked again, shifting her gaze to Rebecca. Don't look at me, Rebecca pouted. I didn't kill any elephants. No, I didn't mean to say that you did anything bad, Tanya said thoughtfully. But if no one bought things made out of ivory, there wouldn't be any reason to kill elephants for it. I just don't think an animal should have to die so its tusks can be made into jewelry and statues and stuff. Besides, elephants are an endangered species. So, I don't see what the big deal is, Rebecca said, laughing, though anger still flared in her eyes. It's not my problem. It's not like I live in Africa or anything. Besides, if the elephant wants this part of its tusk back, it can come and get it. Until then, I'll just wear it myself. Probably looks better on me anyway. The other girls giggled, except for Tanya. I'm sorry if I upset you, but it isn't funny to joke about things like this, she cautioned seriously. Rebecca waved her hand. Relax, Tanya. You're just jealous because you don't have a hair clip like mine. After school, Rebecca had to stay to make up a math test. It was late afternoon by the time she started to walk home, taking her usual shortcut through Lewis Park. She liked the mid-sized park. There was one area in particular where the surrounding homes weren't visible. It was sort of a dip in the grassy landscape with a tall hedge on one side and a grove of trees and bushes on the other. When she was little, Rebecca had liked to play there and pretend that she was in the real forest. Now she walked slowly along the dirt path beside the hedge, humming to herself. She could hear the band practicing at the high school in the distance, and the sound of an occasional car passing on the nearby street. Because it was getting late, the shadows on the ground were already lengthening, and the air had taken on the misty quality of twilight. For some reason, it seemed to be taking longer than usual to reach the end of the grove. Then, all at once, an eerie silence settled among the trees, and Rebecca had the odd sensation that there was no longer anything beyond the hedge. Nervously, she picked up her pace, then stopped and breathed a sigh of relief. The band had started up again. Or had it? That's weird, she muttered, straining to hear the soft, rhythmic sound of drums. A sudden movement on the other side of the hedge made her jump back in alarm, and all of her senses became keenly alert. "Who's there?" she called out, but there was no answer. But something big, very big, seemed to be drawing closer. Rebecca began to run. When she reached the end of the hedge, she stopped in her tracks. The park was completely empty, and the neighborhood beyond was as it should be. Moms and dads were arriving home from work. Lights were going on in homes as darkness fell, and she could even hear the sound of someone's stereo. Everything seemed perfectly normal. So why did she feel so uneasy? The following Friday was a special day for the entire 7th grade class. The school had arranged for a field trip to the local zoo to see a pair of rare pandas on loan from China. The event began with a zoo official giving the class a talk about the role zoos play in the community, and then he showed slides of the pandas in their natural habitat. Afterward, the class broke into smaller groups. Each group had their own guide to give them a tour of the zoo before stopping at the panda compound. Rebecca and Crystal lagged at the back of their group and had a good time making fun of some of the other kids. "Look," Rebecca whispered, pointing to a spiky-coated porcupine that was waddling around its compound. "Doesn't the hair on that thing remind you of Linda Mazzelli?" "Yeah," Crystal agreed, giggling, "and it kind of walks like her, too." The girls continued to make jokes and snicker as the group moved from compound to compound. "Look who's hanging out with the elephants," Crystal said, nudging Rebecca. Rebecca rolled her eyes when she saw that it was Tanya. "Why am I not surprised?" "Hey, Tanya," she called out, "are you having a talk with your animal friends?" Tanya ignored her, so Rebecca and Crystal strolled over to tease her some more. A deep concrete channel encircled the elephant compound, preventing the animals from escaping, and a low chain-link fence bordered the channel. Rebecca leaned on the fence and studied the 2 large elephants within. They're kind of gross. Let's see what they think of my new gift. I like it so much I was thinking of asking my aunt to get me another one." She turned her head and patted her hair, showing off the ivory clip to one of the elephants. "Hey, Jumbo, how do you like it?" she joked cruelly. All at once, the larger of the 2 elephants turned and trotted rapidly toward the channel, stopping at the far edge. Rebecca's nasty grin faded as she saw how the animal reacted. "You shouldn't taunt them," Tanya warned gently. "You never know what can happen." That night, Rebecca couldn't get the incident out of her mind. It had left her feeling troubled. "I don't see why Tanya has to make such a big deal about elephants," she grumbled aloud as she stood in front of her bedroom mirror. She reached up and brushed her fingers over the carved ivory clip in her hair. The image in the mirror flickered slightly, then the room behind her grew hazy. "What in the world?" Rebecca murmured. Her heart began to pound so hard that she could hear its rhythmic pulse. From somewhere behind her, the sound of distant drums matched the rhythm beat for beat. As she stared wide-eyed, Rebecca saw the reflection in the mirror change. Whirling around, she found that she was no longer in her room, but on an open, grassy plain, and that stretched as far as the eye could see. Here and there, scraggly acacia trees stood out starkly against the horizon. "This is impossible," she gasped. "I'm dreaming." She took a step and felt her foot sink into something cool and slick. Looking down, she saw that she was standing at the edge of a pool of muddy water. The banks of the pool were crisscrossed by tracks, animal tracks of all kinds. It was a huge watering hole, and at the far end, a pair of acacias provided meager shelter from the burning sun. In the oasis of shade stood a small group of African elephants. There were several babies and 4 or 5 adults. The largest of them turned in her direction, causing Rebecca to cry out in fear. "Rebecca, what is going on in here? Are you hurt? What's wrong?" Suddenly, Rebecca felt her father's hands on her shoulders. "Dad?" she moaned, gazing up at him through tears. I thought that..." But looking at his face, she knew it was impossible to explain what she had just experienced. I just had a terrible dream." "Do you want to tell me about it?" he asked with concern. She shook her head. "No," she mumbled, beginning to feel foolish. Of course it was only a dream. She had been letting Tanya and all her mumbo-jumbo get to her. I'm just tired from the field trip. I'll be all right." After her dad left the room, Rebecca slowly removed the ivory clip from her hair, vowing to ignore Tanya from now on. In fact, her fear had now turned to resentment. "She doesn't have any right to tell me what to do," Rebecca thought angrily. "I'll wear whatever I want to." The following day, Tanya had stayed home with a cold, and Rebecca forgot all about what had happened until she walked home alone that afternoon. Taking her usual route through Lewis Park, she hesitated beside the hedge. "This is ridiculous," she said, scolding herself. I'm in a public park in broad daylight. Squaring her shoulders, she proceeded along the dirt path. Soon her view of the neighborhood was obscured by trees and bushes. She heaved a relaxed sigh as she rounded the far end of the hedge, and her relief was short-lived. There, directly ahead of her, stretched the sun-drenched plain she had seen in her mirror the night before. Rebecca could even hear insects buzzing lazily in the tall, dry grass, and she could feel the blazing sun on her hair and face. Though it had been a cold, cloudy day just moments before, quickly looking over her shoulder, she saw a pair of acacia trees beside a muddy pond of water. A small family of elephants stood silently, watching. The lead animal took several steps toward her. I know this isn't happening, Rebecca reassured herself. I'm imagining this, and my imagination can't hurt me. But when the phantom beast began to charge, Rebecca screamed and ran. As her feet pounded against the burning ground, she frantically searched for any avenue of escape. All at once she saw what appeared to be a deep, narrow gully and raced toward it as the maddened animal quickly closed the gap between them. Feeling as if her lungs would burst, Rebecca made one final effort and leapt outward toward the gully. Suddenly the creature stopped and trumpeted in victory as the vista of the African plains began to fade and her own neighborhood swam into focus. It was the last thing Rebecca ever saw. She never even felt the blow as something hit her hard from the side, tossing her into the air like a rag doll. She ran out into the street right in front of me, a fanatic truck driver groaned to a police officer who was jotting down notes in a small pad. I didn't have time to react. That's right, an older woman chimed in. That little girl came flying around that hedge like she was being chased by something. I saw the whole thing. A few feet away, 2 other officers stood at the curb. She probably didn't even know what hit her, the first man said sadly. He knelt and picked up a small, sharp, ivory-colored object from the sidewalk. It looked like the broken tip of a tusk. Something must have really scared her, his partner reflected. I wonder what it was. We'll probably never know, the first officer answered, tossing the object into the gutter, where it rolled to a stop beside a broken ivory hair clip. Oh, so not only was that one fun, but like talk about like that so 90s environmentalism kind of bent. That's so like the kind of environmentalism that was in like all kinds of stories in the 90s. That one was fun. Wow, look at that. We got some people listening. Thank you guys for joining us. And also, oh man, I also want to say thank you so much, John Dalton, for being our second tip of the night. Thank you so much. We do accept tips via Venmo and PayPal. They're not required, but they are very much appreciated. So thank you so much, John. And if you guys are looking for something to do this weekend, John's first feature film, Girl in the Crawl Space, is available to stream on Amazon Prime or completely and utterly free on Tubi. So let's see what you guys are saying. Ray Cersei. Oh, gasps and bites nails. Shea Migliavaca, great writer, by the way, he writes stories for Weekly Spooky, said, ordered one of the scary story books. They seem really fun. Dude, they are a blast. I am enjoying reading them so much, and reading them out loud really helps me read better because I'm not a very disciplined reader. So it helps me a lot to read out loud. I enjoy it. Heather Fairchild, she done messed up. That elephant about to learn her today. You got it. Keith Tomlin, finally a happy ending. Keith, always appreciate your candor. Again, thank you, John Dalton, for that tip. Yeah, tipping is appreciated, but it is not mandatory. But it does help us kind of keep going, and I am kind of sort of out of work right now, so I do appreciate the tips. But regardless, I'm having a fun time. I don't know about you guys, but pretty much my entire life, one of my favorite things was to give myself what I always called the spookies. You know, the willies, your goosebumps, the hairs standing on end, and all of that stuff. I always loved doing that. I remember being, 12 or 13 years old and staying up super late on Friday nights reading Snopes by myself and getting so creeped out because Snopes used to be nothing but urban legends, and it would really get to me. I loved it, and I still love it. I'm 33 years old. I still love reading scary stories, giving myself the spookies. I'm a nerd. I'm a total nerd. Let's see what you guys are saying. But but yeah, I think that was a pretty fun story. I did like the very, very 90s environmental message in there about don't you kill animals for ivory. So let's see. Brian Brassfield's watching. Hey Brian, good to see you, man. Catherine Yelton. Hey Catherine, I hope you're doing very well. Cliff Cloister is back on. Cloister is back on. Good to see you, Cliff. I also want to mention, if you guys are enjoying the stream, you see the logo right here on my screen, the little campfire with my face on it. If you go to henflix.com, you can get a t-shirt with that logo on it. We've actually already sold 5 or 6, which I consider to be quite a bit. I mean, it's pretty fun to, I don't know, to spread the joy of sitting alone in the dark, telling scary stories in a creepy woods. Definitely not a photo studio. So, let's see. Well, before I start the next story, reminder, I know I'm a broken record, but hit share. Just hit share and give a quick comment about how much fun you're having or what this stream is or who might enjoy it, and share it. Let's get some people to join us for the fun. So let's see what we got next as we make our way through more super scary stories for sleepovers. Family friendly. Sorta. I mean, you know, Adam's family friendly. Not Manson family friendly, of course, but Adam's family friendly. All right. Oh, we got a comment I wanted to read. I wanted to try and get through some of the comments. Tony Marr said, "This is the new age of entertainment, the golden age of Facebook, brought to you by the coronavirus." Well, thank you, Tony. We're definitely making lemons out of, or we're definitely making lemonade out of a global pandemic as best we can. I think we're all trying to do the best we can. So thank you very much. Craig Cohen said, "My shirt ordered should be here this week." Hopefully it will be. I will say t-shirt orders are taking a little bit longer than normal because some of the factories that are making the t-shirts have been shut down. Yeah, but the other part of your order, Craig, went out today, so you'll probably have that before the weekend. So, all right, let's read another story, and you guys will hit share. All right. Here we go. All right, this story is called Adrift. Lucas picked up a dry, twisted length of mesquite and threw it in the fire. Almost immediately, the flames swirled around it, causing the wood to crackle. Glowing sparks floated up into the warm night air and were soon lost against the backdrop of the star-studded sky. For a while, everyone sat in silence around the wide fire pit they had dug in the desert sand. Lucas was thrilled that his parents had allowed him to go on this spring weekend camping trip with 3 of his friends. Of course, if Andrew's older brother Dennis hadn't offered to come along as a chaperone, Lucas's mom and dad probably wouldn't have agreed. Dennis Kwan was studying at the local university to be a botanist, and he'd made dozens of field trips into the plains and foothills of the southern Mojave Desert to study plants. He knew the area very well and was literally a stockpile of neat facts and stories about the desert. Did you know that the creosote bush may be the oldest living thing on Earth? Dennis asked. He held up a branch for the boys to see. It was covered with tiny green leaves and tipped with little flowers the color of butter. No way, Andrew said with a mischievous smile. Ms. Norman is the oldest living thing on Earth. Everyone laughed. Ms. Norman was the bus driver who drove most of them daily to and from Desert Vale Middle School. Ted's face grew serious. "So, how old is that stuff?" he asked, pointing to the branch in Dennis's hand. "Some of it is as much as 9,000 years old," the 20-year-old stated. "What do you mean by some of it?" Rick questioned. Dennis smiled, glad to see the boys were interested in the subject he loved. "The way it works is that the creosote starts with one plant, then produces a ring of new plants around it. Those produce new ones, and so on, in some cases for thousands of years. So you see, they're really all just clones of the first plant. That's why you can say that a ring of creosote is as old as the original plant. Ted stared in awe at the ring of scraggly plants that grew near the campsite. Is all of that creosote? Dennis nodded. There are lots of strange and unusual things here, he added in a mystical voice. He raised his eyebrow. You might find some of them quite interesting. Like what? Andrew asked, knowing his brother also had a talent for telling great spooky stories around a campfire. I don't know if I should tell you, Dennis pretended to be hesitant. You might not sleep too well if I do. Come on, Lucas begged. The others joined in and Dennis finally agreed to tell them a story. He leaned toward the fire. The flames caused ribbons of light and shadow to flicker across his face as he began. This is a tale of an amazing ghost ship, he said dramatically. A Spanish galleon has sailed in search of its lost treasure for nearly 300 years. Wait a minute, Kevin said with a look of disbelief. We're in the Mojave Desert. The last time I checked, there weren't many ships sailing through here. Ted, Rick, and Lucas burst into laughter. Go ahead and laugh, ye of little faith, Dennis snarled in mock indignation. It just so happens that a long time ago, when Mexico was known as New Spain, Spanish ships sailed in the Gulf of California. Sometimes those ships carried treasures meant to be transported back to Spain. He paused and looked at each of the four boys in turn. One in particular carried a fortune in pearls, but that ill-fated ship never reached its destination. What happened to it? Lucas asked. Dennis leaned back. That was the year of the great floods, he answered, as if telling the tale from his own experience. The Colorado River overflowed, and the unfortunate ship sailed much farther north than it should have. Eventually, it became grounded somewhere in this area. Then, when the flood waters receded, the ship was stranded in the desert. Most of the crew wanted to set out on foot, but the captain and a few loyal sailors refused to leave the treasure that they had vowed to protect. So what did they do? Andrew murmured. He thought he'd heard all of his brother's stories, but this one was new to him. Dennis looked right into his brother's eyes. The crew murdered the captain and all of his followers, he responded with contempt. Then they buried the treasure somewhere in the foothills. I expect they thought they might be rescued, and then they could come back for it. But with the exception of one lone survivor who was discovered near death somewhere around here, none of the sailors were ever seen again. Not alive, that is. Here it comes, Rick said to Lucas. Both boys rolled their eyes and waited for the scary finish. To this day, Dennis continued, a ghostly ship and crew are occasionally sighted sailing the desert in search of the lost treasure. The murderous crew, spurred on by their phantom captain. He put his finger to his lips, then looked from side to side, peering into the shadows beyond the glow of the fire. Some say that if you try hard enough, you can hear the creak of the rigging and the fluttering of the sails in the wind. Everyone sat quietly for a moment. So, Kevin asked at last, does that mean the treasure is still out there? That's what they say, Dennis answered, shifting into a more matter-of-fact tone. I've even seen prospectors in this area looking for it. But if a chest full of pearls is really buried in these foothills, finding it would take a lot of luck. Didn't the survivor tell anyone where it was buried? Lucas asked. Dennis shook his head. It wouldn't have done any good if he had. Sandstorms can whip up and out here without any warning, and once they've passed, things look totally different. Some landmarks can be covered up and others uncovered. It's easy to see how something could be hopelessly lost. There may be a treasure out here, Rick said, rubbing his stomach, but right now I'd settle for a hot dog. Everyone agreed, and soon they were all roasting juicy frankfurters over the fire. Shortly afterward, the boys wriggled into their sleeping bags that were rolled out on the dry ground. Hey, Andrew, Lucas whispered, you still awake? Yeah, his friend replied quietly. I've been thinking. It would be really cool to find that treasure. Maybe we could look for it. There was no answer. Andrew? Lucas tried again. Shh! Andrew moved a little closer and spoke softly, so he was certain that only Lucas could hear him. I just got an excellent idea, he said with a devilish tone. It'll be a great gag, but I don't want to talk about it now. I'll tell you in the morning." "Cool," said Lucas. Andrew had a reputation for playing pranks, and Lucas was glad he was going to be in on it instead of being on the brunt of it. Rolling over onto his back, he put his hands behind his head and gazed up at the stars, wondering what trick his friend had in mind. The next morning, by the time the sun was up, Dennis had started a fire in the sandpit. While the boys rolled up their sleeping bags, he started scrambling eggs in a large cast iron skillet. After breakfast, the boys spent the day exploring a gorge about a half a mile from their campsite. To get to it, they had to hike across a wide, sandy plain with their day packs. Here and there among the waves of sand dunes, they found lavender patches of tiny flowers that Dennis identified as sand verbena. Lucas had all but forgotten about Andrew's prank, and then, once they were in the gorge, the mischievous boy pulled him aside and pointed to a canyon a few hundred yards farther north. "There's an abandoned mine in that canyon," Andrew whispered. "It's loaded with old boards and empty crates left behind by the miners. Dennis had taken me up there a few times," he grinned. "It'll be perfect." "Perfect for what?" Lucas asked in confusion. Andrew's grin grew wider and his eyes sparkled. "All we have to do is sneak up there tonight and get a crate that's still in pretty good shape. We can fill it full of sand and rocks to weigh it down. Then we half bury it near the campsite where one of the guys will find it in the morning." He tried to contain his laughter. "I guarantee whoever finds it will be convinced he discovered the lost treasure. Then everyone will go crazy trying to dig for it." Lucas frowned. "Nobody's gonna fall for that." "Oh, come on," Andrew pleaded. "It's worth a try, and if it works, it'll be a lot of laughs." Lucas shrugged. "I guess," he said, unconvinced. Later that evening, once everyone was asleep, Andrew and Lucas crept silently from the campsite. "You sure you know where you're going?" Lucas questioned once they were far enough away to not be heard. Andrew grinned at him. "No sweat. I've been up here a bunch of times. Besides," he gestured toward the sky, "this is a full moon, so it's as bright. This full moon is so bright that we'll be able to see the campsite even from a distance. There's no way we can get lost." Lucas looked at the sky. Andrew did have a point. The night was crystal clear. "Okay," he said to his friend. "You're the boss." A light, warm wind had started to blow as the boys began to cross the dunes. Lucas's feet sank deep into the sand with each step, making it difficult to walk. By the time they reached the canyon, he was exhausted. To make things worse, the wind had picked up. It moaned eerily through the pass, lifting clouds of sand into the air and making it hard to see. "I don't like this," Lucas said nervously. "Maybe we should go back." "It isn't much further," Andrew coaxed. "We're already here, so we might as well get what we came for." "Yeah, but..." Lucas slipped as he climbed over a low, rocky outcropping and fell to the ground with a grunt. "Ow!" he yelped, grabbing his hand as a few drops of blood trickled out from a jagged cut on his thumb. "Bummer," Andrew said, flopping down beside him. "What did you cut it on?" Lucas scanned the immediate area and noticed an inch-wide band of metal protruding from the coarse sand under the outcropping. "Probably on that," he answered, pointing to the metal band a couple of feet behind him. Andrew crawled over and scooped away some of the loose sand around the metal. "It's attached to something. Help me with this." With his uninjured hand, Lucas helped his friend dig. In moments, the boys uncovered what appeared to be the rotting top of a fairly large chest. The metal strip was one of the two bands that had been wrapped around the chest to seal it shut. Unlike the first band, the other one was still intact, but badly corroded. Andrew pulled out his Swiss Army knife and pried at it until it popped open. The two boys looked at each other for a moment, each knowing that what the other was thinking. Finally, Andrew placed his hands on the lid of the chest and slowly lifted it open. Then he gasped in wonder. Lucas couldn't even gasp. All he could do was stare, speechless. Inside, dozens, maybe hundreds, of huge pearls glimmered in the moonlight. "I don't believe this," Andrew stood up and shouted into the rising air. "It's real! The treasure is real! And we discovered it!" All at once, Lucas found his voice. "Let's try to get it out!" Together, the boys struggled to lift the chest out from under the low rocky shelf, but it wouldn't budge. "We have to get some help," Lucas yelled, trying to shield his face from the blowing sand. He and Andrew scrambled to their feet and started to head for the mouth of the canyon. "Wait!" Lucas shouted over the howling wind. He ran back to the ancient chest and grabbed a large pearl. "Let's go," he said. "Now I've got proof so that the others will believe us." Once they reached the end of the canyon, it was clear that they could go no farther. The plain between them and the campsite was a mass of shifting sand that stung their faces and hands, and it was getting worse by the minute. Much worse. "We won't get far in this," Lucas hollered. "We'll have to find some shelter and wait it out." Andrew nodded, and together they squeezed into a wide cleft between two immense boulders. The wind screeched and wailed like a wounded animal. Lucas pressed his eyes shut and covered his ears. Finally, the terrible blast began to subside, and the sandstorm was over as quickly as it had started. "Let's get back," Andrew urged, and Lucas didn't need to be told twice. He wriggled from his hiding place and followed his friend to the mouth of the canyon. Everything was strangely silent. The moon had slipped behind a thick band of clouds, and there was an unearthly chill in the air. "I don't like this," Lucas muttered. "It doesn't feel right." "Hush," Andrew ordered, straining to see into the darkness ahead of them. "Did you hear that?" Lucas listened. There was something, but what he thought it was just couldn't be. But as the sound grew louder and closer, he couldn't deny that it was a creaking noise, like timbers rubbing against each other. Peering into the night, the boys caught sight of something moving, somehow above the sand dunes. "Run!" Lucas's mind screamed, but no matter how much he willed his trembling body to move, Lucas could not budge. He felt as if his fear had turned him into stone. He sensed that Andrew, too, shared his terror. There, above the darkened plain, a pale glowing ghost ship rose and fell on the invisible waves of a spectral sea. The ship's sails billowed out as if a brisk wind filled them. As the boys gaped hopelessly, the ship sailed closer, close enough so that Lucas could make out shadowy figures on deck. It glided within a few yards of them, and then stopped, blocking off any hope of escape. The air became dense and reeked of salt and seawater. Finding it hard to breathe, Lucas felt as if he were drowning. He struggled to move, to save himself, but everything became hazy. When his vision cleared, he found himself lying next to Andrew on the rotting deck of an ancient ship. "Where are we?" Andrew stammered. Lucas said nothing, fearing the only possible answer. The smell of dampness and mold filled his nostrils, and he was chilled to the bone. "No!" Lucas wailed in terror as phantom hands gripped him and shoved him below deck into a small chamber. He landed in a heap on the floor, and beside him was Andrew. Something walked slowly and carefully across the wooden floorboards, then stopped a few inches from where the boys huddled. Lucas risked a glance upward and tried not to gag. The spirit of the ship's captain leaned over them, the grisly head wound that had caused his death still oozing on his ghostly forehead. When he opened his mouth to speak, a gust of foul air reeking of death and decay made the boys recoil in disgust. "Where did you find this?" the gruesome creature asked in a hollow voice. Lucas saw that it held the pearl he had taken from the chest. I can't show you," he stuttered, forcing himself to speak. "I can show you if you let us go." "Done," the hideous specter agreed. Within moments, Lucas and Andrew were leaning over the railing of the ghost ship as it sailed silently along the canyon wall. "I don't see it," Andrew sobbed. "I can't see the spot where we found the treasure." Lucas scanned every inch of the canyon, but the low outcropping of rocks was nowhere to be found. During the powerful storm, the sands of the canyon floor had shifted completely, and nothing was familiar. All of the heaps and piles of sand and rock looked the same. There was no way he could pick out the spot where the chest lay buried. "It was here!" he cried, but already the ship was turning back toward the murky phantom sea that it was doomed to sail until the elusive treasure was finally found. "Now you must join our search," bellowed the spirit captain, "even if it lasts forever." Oh man, I got goosebumps. Really good. That was really good goosebumps. That was like a solid goosebumper, guys. Oh man, let's see how you guys are doing. Morgan Moore. So essentially, this is the backstory of One-Eyed Willie. I mean, you're not far off. um, Josh Gianot, always a full moon. That is a law. Whenever spoopy stuff is happening, the moon is full, even if it wasn't before. Cliff Cloyster, sand walking ain't no joke. Yeah, really, it'll take it out of your legs. Laser Mazer, Uncle Henny, love you, brother. Ray Cersei, gasp, no hope, Wales. Heather Fairchild, scared. And Ray Cersei, okay, that was a good one, legit. That one really got me. It really did. I wasn't kidding about the goosebumps. I got goosebumps from that. Ray Brown said, you believe in ghost stories? You're in one. Welcome aboard the Black Pearl. Heather Fairchild, Captain needs a Tic Tac. I think he might need something a little stronger than a Tic Tac. Oh, and while we were going, we got a tip. Thank you so much from Heather Fairchild. She said, keep the stories coming. It's such a fun time. I feel like I'm back in my youth and watching Are You Afraid of the Dark? You're so appreciated. Much love, Heather Fairchild and family. Thank you so much for the note and for the tip. It is very, very much appreciated. Extremely appreciated. It really does mean the world to me. So it seems like you guys really dug that one. Gonna get a little water going. My throat is getting a little hoarse, but that's okay. It did last time too. Oh, we got another tip. Gosh, you guys are great. Thank you guys so much. A tip from Keith Tomlin, probably just, tipping because he's thrilled whenever children are put in peril in a story. That's just kind of how Keith is. But you guys like that one? I was not... one thing I like about these stories is sometimes I think I can figure out where they're going. I mean, I'm talking about like when I read the title, because I'm reading all of these brand new to me. Unless I read them as a kid, but I probably would have forgotten them by now. But all these stories are new to me. So, like when I read Adrift, I'm thinking like, what is this going to be? And then when I see they're in the desert, I'm like, oh, it's going to be like adrift, on the sand or what have you. And then it turns into a ghost pirate ship in the desert. Didn't see that coming, but I'm happy it arrived. Keith Tomlin said, it's good to have hobbies. So you guys enjoyed that one? I'm excited, almost sad, but also excited to tell you that we have almost read, between last week and this week, we've almost read all of More Super Scary Stories for sleepovers. But I happen to have right here even more scary stories for sleepovers, and the first one that started it all, the original Scary Stories for Sleepovers. So we've got plenty of material to make it till 10 o'clock tonight, and plenty of material to at least get through most of our social distancing struggle. And I am going to be, especially with your tips, I'm going to be using that to buy even more. My intention is for us to read all of the Scary Stories for Sleepovers books, and then we'll move on to something else. I don't know what yet. I am open to suggestions. I'm open to being emailed scary stories. As long as they're family friendly, I want to read them. Keith, nice you made the cover. Thanks, Keith. You're a bully, but I like you anyway. But yeah, so again, I know I'm a broken record, but two things. Tipping is appreciated, but not required. I do very much appreciate any help you guys throw my way while I tell some scary stories. This is like my spooky, nerdy, digital way of busking, except instead of playing guitar on the street, I'm telling scary stories on the Facebook. Because right now I'm pretty much out of work. It is what it is. I'm doing okay. I hope you guys don't think that that's a huge poverty plea, but that is why I am asking for tips. It is simply because I'm out of work at the moment, but I won't be forever. And if you're out there and you're out of work too, don't feel like you need to throw any of your money my way. You should hold on to it, take care of yourself, take care of your family. I hope everybody's okay. I don't want to get heavy for a second, but I hope everybody's okay. I really do. This has really helped me feel okay. Jeff Berkman said TZ collections, they're out there. Also Richard Matheson collections. Nathan Mackley, love the story. Awesome, man. Keep up the good work. Thank you. So, but yeah, but the other point, beyond tipping, which is just optional, what I don't consider optional is you should hit the share button right now and let your friends know you're listening to some fun, scary stories, you're having a good time, and you think they should join you, because really the best part about this is just getting as many people as we can to come and hang out. So on that note, I think it's time for another story. You might have heard Henwolf shaking just a second ago. She's sleepy. She's a good dog. All right. So, all right. Let's see what we got next as we continue through more super scary stories for sleepovers. Oh, Rob Field said, what about scary stories to tell in the dark? I'm thinking about it. One of the reasons I wasn't going to read scary stories to tell in the dark is it's like too famous. I feel like everybody remembers those. I remember reading them. But these books I feel like are woefully forgotten. And I want to remind people how much fun these are. Because I remember loving these and getting them from the library when I was in elementary school. So, you know, I might go to scary stories to tell in the dark, but right now I love this. My heart is always with the kitschy stuff. Like, I loved Fear Street and Goosebumps, but I was obsessed with the Christopher Pike books. You know, I was obsessed with the Nightmare Hall books. There's something I love about off-brand. Maybe it's because I myself am off-brand. I don't know, but it's something I just love. Oh, another comment. Morgan Moore said, would be down for a good old classic of spooky Ohio. Well, send me a link or something, either on, you know, message me on Facebook or something like that. Jeff Bergman, you rock H. Also, Stephen King has written some scary stuff, or so I hear. Well played, well played. I don't know how much of it is family friendly, but I do like it. All right, let's get to the story. Oh, all right. Ooh. This story is called The Final Draft. Vanessa's mother looked around happily. "It's a perfect house," she exclaimed. Can't you just imagine can't you just imagine a murder taking place here?" Vanessa nodded and pushed aside the wispy white drapes at the large bay window in the living room. Outside, a wide expanse of closely clipped green lawn swept to the top of a low cliff overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. That opening line. Vanessa's twin sister, Samantha, was already walking along the edge of the bluff in the early morning sunlight, trying to find the quickest path to the beach below. "Is somebody going to get shoved off the cliff?" Vanessa asked innocently. "Nope," her dad answered as he stepped through the open front door carrying 2 overstuffed suitcases. "I think that's too obvious. We need something more sinister, more gothic," her mother offered. Vanessa smiled. Having a pair of screenwriters for parents was never dull. Once, when her mom and dad were asked to write a script about voodoo, the girls got to go along for a week on the Caribbean island. Another time, their parents had taken them to see the ruins of Egyptian pyramids for background on a tale about an ancient mummy. Now Vanessa's mom and dad had gotten an offer to come up with a new script for a scary murder mystery, so they'd simply rented the spookiest home they could find on the coast of Maine and packed up the family for the whole summer. Here they were, ready to work on an idea. "This place is great," Samantha exclaimed, letting the screen door slam behind her as she raced inside. "The backyard is huge, and there's an old-fashioned swing, flower gardens, fruit trees, and even a birdhouse. Come on, Vanessa," she urged. "Come check it out with me." "Not yet, young ladies," their mom said, halting the girls at the door and pointing to their suitcases. "These need to be unpacked first. You'll have plenty of time to explore later." By the time their mom called them downstairs for a lunch of deli sandwiches and potato salad, Vanessa and Samantha had put all of their things away in the room they were sharing. It was a marvelous old-fashioned room with delicate rosebud wallpaper and a window seat with plump pink seat cushions. Their parents had set up the den as an office and had already spent a couple of hours working. Once the girls sat down at the table for lunch, their parents told them a little about the story. The main point is that the ghost of the murdered woman is trying to come back in order to identify the person who killed her to the people who are now living in the house that she was killed in 10 years ago. They, of course, have no idea that the murder had even taken place. Vanessa's mom explained as the girls spooned potato salad onto their plates. "Cool," Samantha said. "I like it." "Yeah, Mom," Vanessa agreed. "What happens next?" Their mother leaned over the table as if about to share a secret with them. "The spirit leads one of the main characters, probably the daughter, to the murder weapon that has been hidden in the house all the time." Vanessa's dad helped himself to some potato chips from a large bowl on the table. "More important, the Phantom will then lead somebody to her very own corpse," he added, a twinkle in his eye. "The police think that the dead woman jumped off a cliff and her body was washed out to sea," he said dramatically. "What they don't know is that she was really murdered by her cousins, who hid the body in the old well." "That's a great idea, Dad," Vanessa said. "Did you guys think up that whole plot this morning?" Her mother smiled. "Well, we haven't exactly worked the whole plot out, but yes, most of the idea just seemed to flow onto the computer." "It's this old house," Vanessa's dad declared, as he toyed with his turkey on rye. "I feel almost like it's focusing our creative energies and magnifying them." Samantha rolled her eyes at Vanessa as if to say, "Oh, brother, writers." "What made you think of using a well to hide the body?" Vanessa asked, trying not to laugh at her sister's antics. "There's an old well near Laurel Hedge," their mother answered. "It gave us the idea." "I didn't see a well," Samantha commented, raising her eyebrows, "and I walked all the way around that hedge this morning." "It's there," her dad said, finishing the last bite of his sandwich. "So what do you think about taking some time off this weekend and having a picnic on the beach?" Everyone agreed that it was a great idea, and for the moment the subject of the well and the script was forgotten. After lunch, the girls went outside together and walked the length of the overgrown laurel hedge, first up one side, then down the other. "This must be it," Vanessa guessed, pointing to an ancient-looking gray stone well that was half hidden within a tangle of tall grass and wild rose bushes. A wooden crossbeam had a corroded bucket hanging from it by a rotting rope connected to a metal crank. Vanessa gave the crank handle a tug. "It's rusted solid," she said, disappointed. Samantha furrowed her brow. "That well was not here this morning. I would have seen it." "Oh, come on, Sam," Vanessa said, laughing. "It didn't suddenly appear out of nowhere. You just didn't notice it with all the stuff growing around it." She paused, then gnarled her fingers like a witch. In a spooky voice, she added, "If this is a ghost well, then maybe there really is a body down there." Vanessa pulled away several overhanging vines and exposed a wooden lid that sealed the well shut. "I would have seen it," Samantha muttered. "I know I would have." "Come on," urged Vanessa, ignoring her. "Let's see if we can get this lid off." When they went to bed that night, Vanessa was still too excited about being in the creepy old house to sleep. She listened to her sister's calm, relaxing breathing, which was almost in perfect time with the soothing rhythm of the ocean waves rolling onto the nearby beach. Through the open window, she could even hear crickets chirping. Vanessa listened more closely. "Those aren't crickets," she thought, slipping out of bed. "It must be that swing squeaking." She went to the window and looked at the swing, but it was hanging perfectly still from a sturdy branch of the huge oak tree in the center of the yard. The lawn was bathed in moonlight, and the edge of the cliff stood out clearly against the blackness of the ocean behind. Vanessa turned her head to one side, trying to focus on the odd noise. It was coming from the darkness along the laurel hedge. "What are you doing?" Samantha asked, startling her sister. "I heard something," Vanessa whispered. "Come here and listen." Samantha joined her sister at the window. "It sounds like somebody's twisting a big piece of metal," she guessed. Vanessa's eyes opened wide. "The well!" she gasped. "Maybe somebody's turning the crank." "The crank!" Samantha and Vanessa looked at each other, then turned their gaze back to the hedge. "There!" Samantha exclaimed, pointing out into the dark, gloomy yard. "What's that moving down there?" Vanessa squinted. She could barely make out the dark shadow at the far end of the hedge. It was inching slowly toward the house. All at once, she heard a sound on the stairs and grabbed Samantha's arm. It was coming closer, the polished wooden steps creaking under its weight as it mounted them one by one. "Don't forget to check the front door," their mom called quietly to their dad. Both girls sighed with relief. A moment later, they heard their father also climbing the stairs. The hall light snapped off, and the door to the master bedroom closed. Vanessa's heartbeat slowly returned to normal. "They must be turning in for the night," she whispered as she peered down once again at the backyard. There was nothing out of the ordinary. "Do you think we should tell them what we saw?" "What did we see?" Samantha asked. "We're just letting this place get to us. I mean, after hearing Mom and Dad's story about the well and all, maybe we were just imagining things," Vanessa said with a giggle. Mom and Dad would be proud. Maybe we'll be writers too. She cast a final glance outside and reassured that everything was as it should be, and returned to bed. The following day, they explored the shoreline of the beautiful sandy cove at the bottom of the cliff. Vanessa even braved the chilly Atlantic to take a brisk swim. Samantha rolled up the legs of her jeans and did some beach combing, filling a plastic bucket with shells, rocks, and odd pieces of driftwood. At lunchtime, their parents took a break, and the family had a picnic lunch on the beach. Both Samantha and Vanessa had fallen in love with the area. "I can't imagine ever wanting to leave this incredible place," Vanessa exclaimed. Exhausted from all the sun and exercise, the twins went to bed early. Vanessa snuggled under the covers and drifted off to sleep immediately. She awoke to the pressure of Samantha's hand, clasped tightly on her wrist. "What?" Vanessa started to ask drowsily. Samantha pressed her finger to her sister's lips to stop her from speaking. Samantha's face was white with fear, and Vanessa instantly realized they were not alone in the room. Terrified, she drew in a lungful of foul, dank air that smelled of mildew. "What's going on?" her mind screamed as the tiny hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. Now painfully alert to every sound, Vanessa heard someone feeling along the molding that framed the window, and what she saw chilled her blood. Something that resembled a woman was leaning over the window seat, but it wasn't a woman. It was dark like a shadow, but had a faint glimmer to it, as if it were wet, giving it a sheen like that of a polished marble. Whatever it was, it seemed to be searching for something. Vanessa drew the covers back over her head as slowly as she could. Samantha, now under the covers with her, was trembling with fright, gripping Vanessa's hand so tightly she was cutting off circulation in her fingers. Desperately trying to control her own ragged breathing, Vanessa was beginning to think that her fear would stop her from taking another breath at all. Suddenly, the mildewy air turned fresh and smelled of grass and jasmine. Cautiously risking a peek out from under the covers, she cast a furtive glance at the window. But there was nothing there. Heaving a sigh of relief, Vanessa sat down and turned on the light beside the bed. Samantha sat up too. Her face was pale and her eyes were red, as though she had been squeezing them tightly shut. "Were we just dreaming?" Vanessa murmured hopefully. "I don't think so," Samantha answered, her voice faltering, and then her eyes widened. "Look!" she cried. Vanessa followed her sister's horrified gaze to the hardwood floor. A line of small, damp footprints led from the door to the window. "I'm getting Mom and Dad," Vanessa shrieked, tossing aside the covers. She raced down the stairs with Samantha close behind. They found their parents were still hard at work in the den. Their dad was pacing back and forth, reading through pages of printed notes, while their mother pecked at the keyboard on the computer. "Dad! Mom!" Vanessa shouted. "There was something in our room." "Yeah?" "Yeah," Samantha gasped. "It was like a dark shadow and it—" "Wait a minute, slow down," their father said calmly, holding up his hand. "The two of you must have been dreaming. I'm sure there's nothing in your room." He dropped his notes on the table and wrapped his arms around his terrified daughters. "Come on, let's all go up and see, shall we?" "I don't want to," Samantha protested, breaking away and going to stand next to their mother. Slipping off his glasses, their dad rubbed his eyes. "Just what was it again that you thought you saw?" "It was a woman, but more like a shadow," Vanessa said with a shiver. "It was dark, but it kind of glowed." Samantha nodded absent-mindedly, for her eyes had drifted to the script her parents were writing on the computer. She stared at the screen and mumbled, "It was like a shadow, but had a faint glimmer to it as if it were wet, giving it a sheen like a polished marble. Whatever it was, it seemed to be searching for something." "That's right! She's right! That's exactly—" Vanessa paused when she realized that her sister was reading from the screen. "The thing keeps it up its search," Samantha read on. Horrified, the young girl slowly draws the covers back over her head. She stopped and slowly looked up at Vanessa. "It's all right here in the script," she said stiffly. "Even the part about the footprints." "I don't understand," Vanessa said, looking from her father to her mother. "What you wrote, it came true. It really happened." "Yeah," Samantha said. "It happened to us." Her father shook his head. "Maybe we're all just getting caught up in this thing," he said calmly. "You two probably just overheard your mother and I talking about the story, and without even realizing it, you had a dream about the exact same thing." "Of course, your father's right," their mother agreed. There are so many kinks in this plot, and we've been working so hard to get them ironed out. Somehow it all must be having an effect on you girls. That's the only possible explanation." "No," Vanessa said, looking toward the stairs that led to their room. "It isn't the only explanation. I think this place really is haunted." After their dad had looked on into every closet and corner, the girls agreed to go back to bed. Still, they insisted on leaving the light on. The sun was just a glowing semicircle over the deep blue of the Atlantic when Samantha shook Vanessa awake. "Come on," she urged. "I want to go down to the well and see if the cover's still on." Vanessa rubbed her eyes. "Why?" she asked. "Come on," Samantha insisted, tossing Vanessa's jeans onto the bed. "Think about it. How else would you explain those damp footprints?" Within a few minutes, the girls were rounding the edge of the laurel hedge. Vanessa froze in her tracks. "This isn't possible," she said in disbelief. Samantha gaped wordlessly. Where the decrepit well should have been, draped in a chaotic web of grass and wild roses, there now stood a pristine white gazebo. It was surrounded by a dainty half-circle of well-tended rose bushes. "What is happening here?" Vanessa moaned. She grabbed Samantha's hand, and together they ran around the hedge and across the lawn. Gasping for breath, they both clambered onto the porch and, throwing open the screen door, charged into the house. "Mom! Dad!" Vanessa screamed. "We're in here!" Her father called, appearing in the doorway to the den. "What's wrong?" "It's the well," Samantha sputtered. "We went to see if there would be anything different about it after what happened last night, but it's completely gone. There's a gazebo there instead, and all the bushes have been trimmed, and—" She stopped. Both of her parents were looking at her quizzically. "What are you talking about?" her mother finally asked, in a mystified tone. "There's no well around here." "But there was," Vanessa answered uncertainly. "It was right behind the laurel hedge." Her father shook his head and grinned. "You would think that you two were the ones who stayed up working all night instead of us." He took a gulp of coffee from his ceramic mug. "There's no well back there. We just wrote about one." "Your dad's right. We just made up the well," her mother said, the corners of her mouth turning up in a pleasant smile. "We just used our imagination, and I'll bet that's what you two are doing too, unless you're trying to play a joke on us." Confused, Vanessa glanced at a bewildered-looking Samantha. "Well, none of this matters anyway," their father said, laughing. "The idea wasn't coming together, so we dumped it." "Dumped it?" Vanessa asked. "Yep. We erased the file a couple of hours ago and started working on a new idea," he explained enthusiastically. "It's much more exciting. It's about this—" Just then the telephone rang. "I'll tell you about it in a little bit," their dad said as he reached for the receiver and flipped onto the couch. Vanessa felt a wave of relief. No matter how hard her parents tried to explain away the strange things they'd seen, she was certain that the weird occurrences had something to do with the script they were writing. True, maybe she and Samantha just dreamed everything, but maybe their father had been right when he said that there was something about the old house that focused their creative energies, making the events they wrote real. In any case, it no longer mattered. The script was gone, and so was the well, along with whatever lurked in its moldy depths. "Why don't we go and fix a nice hot breakfast?" she heard her mother saying. Vanessa turned to follow Samantha toward the kitchen when she caught a few words of her dad's telephone conversation. "You'll love it," he was saying enthusiastically to someone on the other end of the line. "We stayed up all night to finish the first scene. It starts with this family that rents a house on the coast of New England. It's a tranquil spot, and the house is a great old place. You know the type. Old-fashioned, swing in the backyard, beautiful white gazebo surrounded by rose bushes. Anyway..." Vanessa stood riveted to the spot. "That's where the gazebo came from," she thought with a growing sense of dread. "And the family is totally unaware that this huge asteroid is hurtling through space on a collision course with Earth. We're talking an asteroid the size of Mount Everest." "No!" Vanessa screamed aloud at her father. "Don't you see? What you write in this house comes true." Her father looked at her sternly and held up his hand to quiet her as he continued his conversation. "So get this, it's all done in flashbacks. It begins when the asteroid hits. It splashes down somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean just off the coast of New England, and—" "No!" Vanessa howled as the ground began to tremble, then rock fiercely. "You've got to erase the script!" But her warning was too late. The last thing Vanessa saw was the sky blazing from bright blue to fiery, brilliant white. Then the house shivered and swayed, and finally burst into splinters of wood and showers of glass in the earth-shattering explosion that inevitably followed as an immense asteroid plunged into the Atlantic Ocean, only a mile away. That one, I like that one. I thought it was kind of losing me for a second, but I like the idea of like the manifesting, that what they're doing is manifesting. I like that. That got me. Ray Cersei, I feel this story in my soul. Josh Giannot, best one yet. Ray Cersei, Lord, my heart pounded. I'm glad you guys are into this too. Raymond Brown, I'm digging this story. This is cool. Thank you. Morgan Moore, my favorite one of the evening so far. Good. I'm so glad you guys are digging it. Heather Fairchild, if this story is ever made into a movie, Nicolas Cage needs to play the dad. Yes. Michelle Antisocial said, wow, seriously? What? You're going to deny the realism of writing a story and it causing everyone to potentially die on the East Coast? All right. I need a little bit of water. But so you guys are doing good. It seems like you guys dug that story. I'm a sucker for the idea of like writing, manifesting. That's kind of like from the old Twilight Zones and Outer Limits and stuff like that. That's what that makes me think of anyway. Keith Tomlin, it brought me back at the end when everyone died, especially the kids. Oh, Keith, such a kidder. Oof, okay. Whew, all right. I think my voice has one more in it. And then I got to call it a night because I don't want to wreck my voice too bad. And I also want to mention, if you guys are looking for something else to do after this stream ends, at 11 o'clock Eastern on my Facebook page, I'm going to be doing a live stream a live stream commentary of my movie Haunting Inside, also known as Ouija Room, where everybody will be meeting in a event page, and they'll all start the movie at about the same time, so my comments will relatively match the movie, and it'll be streaming free on Tubi, so you don't have to spend any money at all. You can hang out with me for another hour and a half if you really want to, and it'll be a lot of fun. But that's what I'm doing at 11 o'clock. If you want to find out more information, just keep an eye on my Facebook page as soon as this ends, and I'll be posting the link. So, wow, some good comments. Thank you guys. Excuse me, sorry about that. I'm feeling just a little rough in my throat, so I'm trying to take care of it. Just want to mention one more time, for those who weren't listening before, please hit the share button. We're about to do our last story of the night, which is the final story in the More Super Scary Stories to Tell at Sleepovers book. We're going to be reading the last story here in a minute, so hit that share button. Oh, and thank you so much, Ray Cersei. She just sent me a very, very generous tip. She said, for the main story with hearts. Thank you so much for the tip. You know, again, tips are not required, but they are hugely appreciated. They keep things going. Also, Ray Cersei, are you from New England? Is that one of the reasons that you liked it, or do you have like a thing for New England stories? I actually, growing up, I spent all my summers in New Hampshire and Connecticut with my father in New Hampshire and my grandparents who lived in Connecticut. So I got a whole lot of New England going on in my life as a child. It was a wicked good time drinking coffee milk. Yeah, if you've been to New England, especially Rhode Island, you know all about coffee milk. Apologize for that. That was pretty loud. Oh, Ray, wow, you grew up in Maine. Awesome. Maine, I haven't been to New England in about 11 years. Last time I was in New England, I went to Worcester, Massachusetts for the Rock and Shock convention, and it was awesome. Oh, and you were born in New Hampshire. Very cool. Very, very cool. Yeah, I've always enjoyed New England. Grabbing a lobster roll and a coffee milk. I don't think those two tastes go great together, but who am I to judge? Ray Cersei, listen, coffee milk is delicious, okay? I'm not arguing. When I was a baby growing up in New Hampshire, my mother put coffee milk in my sippy cup, and I would not drink anything else as soon as that happened. And to this day, when I can score a bottle of coffee milk, I score a bottle of coffee milk. Oh, she said I could spit on the ocean. Wow. Well, don't do that or you'll anger it like in the stories. So Ray Brown said, I've got a cousin I've never met in New Hampshire. Hope to go see him soon. New Hampshire's a pretty cool spot to visit. And the beaches are pretty fun. They're freezing cold, but they're very pretty. There's a lot to like about New England. All right. Well, when this final story's done, I'll hang out for a little while too. I just need to prepare my voice. I'm going to spray a little bit of antiseptic spray on it. Ray Mattis said, I still drink from a sippy cup. Don't judge. Jeff McClellan said, I keep my house completely dark. I have a digital campfire on the TV thanks to Amazon, and I sit here with my laptop watching you read to me. Perfect Wednesday evening. I'm very flattered, Jeffy. Very flattered. And I'm very flattered that anybody would choose to spend their evening with me. I hugely appreciate it. And then I'll just quietly motion to the tips. But and thank you for all the generous tips I've gotten tonight. I really do appreciate it. All right, my friends. I think it's time we put more super scary stories for sleepovers to bed. And I'm going to do it justice. Because this is the last story. But remember, next Wednesday, same time, right here on Facebook, and maybe also on YouTube. I'm working on that right now. I will be back, and I'll be reading even more scary stories for sleepovers. Sorry, this one's super scary. Even more scary stories for sleepovers is coming next week. So we're not running out of the fun. I'm enjoying this so much. Having something to look forward to every week is really making a huge difference in my mindset right now, given everything that's going on. So thank you, guys. Here we go. All right. The final story for tonight is called The Exchange. Javier's mother stood at the door of his room. Her forehead wrinkled into a frown. I thought you said you were doing homework, she complained wearily. You told me you didn't have time to help with the dishes because you had a book report due tomorrow. Stretched out on his bed, Javier looked at her over the cover of a comic book. I got tired of working on it, he said simply, and returned his gaze to the comic book. It was his favorite character, the Savage Sorcerer, a dark sort of medieval supernatural being who had mastered the art of magic and used it to get what he wanted. His mother sighed. I give up. I'm tired of always having to nag to get you to do anything. We'll just wait until your father gets home and see what he has to say. She closed the door and left him alone. Javier let out a short, humorless laugh. His father worked the swing shift and rarely even saw his family except on weekends, so he wasn't worried about his mother's threat. He went back to studying his comic book. There was an illustration of a tall, muscular man dressed in black with a hooded cape, and he was blasting an enemy with magical flashes of energy that shot from his eyes. If I had powers like that, I'd never have to worry about homework or chores or anything, Javier thought enviously. I could do whatever I wanted. He glanced up at the collection of books and magic kits that he had constantly wasted his allowance on. They're no use, he muttered. If I'm ever going to have real magical powers, I have to learn from a real sorcerer. Tossing the book to the floor, he walked to the window and stared up at the crescent moon. I'd give anything for powers like that, he whispered. Anything. On weekends, Javier's mother usually took him and his grandmother shopping, first at the local mall, and then at the grocery store. His grandmother didn't drive. In fact, she was a little afraid of cars. Javier figured it was because she was so old. He didn't like being around old people. He thought they were too slow and always talked about things that happened a long time ago, as if those things were actually still important. Today, as usual, he was impatient with his grandmother, and as soon as they got to the mall, he made an excuse to go off on his own. Meet us at the pharmacy in 1 hour, his mother called after him as Javier headed for the escalators. Yeah, he muttered, stepping onto the first moving step. There was a video arcade on the second floor and a small magic shop. The shop had all the usual stuff, but it was better than nothing. After a few minutes in the video arcade, Javier strolled to the magic shop and halted in surprise. Instead of being filled with a jumble of merchandise on display, the front window was covered by a black curtain. In the lower right corner was a sign that read, Under New Management. And below that, Errand Person Wanted, Apply Within. Curious, Javier stepped inside. Gloomy and dim, the shop was filled with the smell of incense and scented candles. A tape was playing that sounded like people chanting, but he couldn't figure out where the sound was coming from. Slowly, he explored the shop. In one glass showcase, there were trays of glittering crystals, pots of what looked like multicolored sand, tiny packets of dried herbs, and small sculptures of mythical creatures such as dragons and gargoyles. The other case held typical magic tricks, as well as cards for fortune-telling and scrolls of astrological signs. Well-stocked bookcases lined the room, and on the wall, behind the old-fashioned brass cash register, hung an aging publicity poster of a handsome young man dressed in the style of the 1940s. Javier read the claim below aloud. Ronaldo, the world's greatest magician. "And I was," a voice declared dramatically. Startled, Javier jumped, then whirled around to see an elderly man with a halo of snow-white hair who bore a striking resemblance to the dapper fellow in the picture. "I am Ronaldo," the man said. "Are you here about the job? If you are, you need to know that this is no ordinary magic shop with marked cards and boxes with false compartments," he muttered with obvious distaste. "I'm concerned with true magic, not parlor tricks." He scowled. "Now, does the job interest you?" Javier had been just snooping around, but what the man said gave him an idea. Maybe this was the chance he was looking for to learn something about real magic, even if the guy did seem like a grouch. "Yes," Javier declared with a forced smile, "I'd like to apply for the job." Ronaldo raised an eyebrow and stroked his chin with the long, slender fingers of one gloved hand. "I require someone to run errands and do odd jobs Saturdays and Sundays," he said. "So if you want to spend your weekends with your family or catching up on homework—" "Oh, that's not important," Javier interrupted. Ronaldo eyed Javier up and down for a moment. "You're rather young," he said finally. "What about friends? Don't you want to spend time with them on the weekends?" Javier shook his head. "Nah, I don't like other kids very much. I can't wait to grow up." After staring at Javier for another moment, the old man reached behind the counter and pulled out a crisp sheet of paper and a pen. "Fill out this form," he instructed curtly. "I'll let you know." When Javier got a call from the magic shop a week later, he was thrilled. He reported to work early Saturday morning, planning to learn everything that he could from the old magician. Finding the front door was unlocked, he wasn't sure what to do. He entered and saw several candles already flickering in their holders. The place appeared to be deserted. "Hello?" he called out. "Good morning," a woman answered. But from where? Following the sound of her heavily accented voice, a small curtain-draped cubicle at the back of the store, Javier found a woman who looked even older than his grandmother. Her face was deeply lined and wrinkled, and tufts of kinky gray hair stuck out from under a colorful scarf she tied around her head. She was sitting at a table covered in red velvet, carefully laying cards out on the table. "I am Greta," the woman said without looking up. Javier introduced himself as the new errand boy and asked her what card game she was playing. She stopped and stared into his eyes, making Javier feel very uncomfortable. "I am not playing," Greta answered. "This is a deck of tarot cards, and one does not play games with it." Javier moved closer and looked at the cards. They had strange pictures on them. He knew some people believed that tarot cards could be used to predict the future. "Can you tell me my fortune with those things?" he asked. "I do not need cards to tell your fate," the elderly woman said, mysteriously. "It is here." She held out both hands in the dim light, and Javier stared at her slender, gnarled fingers and age-spotted skin that hung loosely on the back of her hands. "Your fate was already decided when you walked through that door," she added, "and the only way to avoid it is to leave now, before—" Suddenly, Greta seemed fearful, and her gaze shifted to the front door. Javier turned to see Ronaldo standing there. "Ah, so you're here," he said. "Well, you needn't stand idle. Come with me. There are some boxes and books that need to be unpacked." Javier followed the old man to a cramped, gloomy storeroom filled with cardboard boxes. "Check the contents of these boxes against this list," he said, handing Javier a printed sheet of paper. "When you are finished, you can dust the shelves in the shop." And with that, he turned and brushed by the boy, leaving him alone in the dimly lit room. Javier looked around, then set to work by the light of only one bare light bulb that hung from the ceiling. He opened the first box and peered inside. It was filled with books on sorcery. One small volume in particular caught Javier's attention. "The Spells of the Ancients," he read aloud, opening the book. As he did, something skittered along the far wall. Alarmed, Javier turned and stared into the shadows. But there was nothing there. "Must be rats," he muttered with a shiver. "I better get to work and get out of this gross place." But he really wanted to read a little of the small book he still held in his hands. Then he made a decision. He quickly hid the book under a box so he could get it later and take it home. After finishing the chore Ronaldo had given him, Javier picked up a feather duster and was hanging on a hook on the wall and headed for the main area of the shop to dust the shelves. As he worked, he noticed the people who entered the shop. Some were obviously just curious shoppers. Others seemed a little odd, even creepy. One woman purchased a bag of dried herbs and, muttering something under her breath, took out a pinch, crushed it into her fingers, and sprinkled it over her own hair. Then a man with a patch over one eye asked Javier if the store stocked spider venom. Shuddering, Javier went to ask Ronaldo, noticing that the man kept glancing nervously over his shoulder at the door as if he were afraid of what might enter. By the afternoon, Javier was ready to go home, both because he was tired and because the place had given him a good case of the creeps. Before he left, however, he slipped back to the storeroom once again to retrieve the slim book on sorcery that he had hidden earlier. Making sure that no one could see what he was doing, he tucked the book under his shirt. But when he turned to leave, Javier found himself face to face with Ronaldo. "I see you are not to be trusted," the aged man growled. Javier shook his head. "You don't understand," he moaned. "I wasn't stealing it. I was going to bring it back. I just wanted to read it and maybe learn some of the spells." Ronaldo glared at him. "You might have asked," he said slowly. "But no matter. If you are so desperate to learn a few magical spells, I can grant your desire." Javier wasn't sure what to say. He thought the man would be angry, but here it seemed Ronaldo was offering to tutor him. "You look surprised," Ronaldo remarked with a sly grin. "I could show you many things. I assure you I am a most capable sorcerer." As a demonstration, he pointed one finger at a box on the floor, and it slowly rose into the air, then began to spin. Javier gasped in stunned amazement. "Yes, I would be willing to share some of my knowledge with you," Ronaldo added, "but of course I would want something in exchange." Something inside of Javier screamed that he should just put the book down, leave, and never come back. But he couldn't tear his eyes away from the spinning box. He'd give anything to be able to do such things, and here was somebody who obviously knew how to teach him. "What kind of exchange?" Javier asked, uneasy, against his better judgment. "You don't mean that you want my soul or something, do you?" Ronaldo tipped back his head and laughed unpleasantly. "No, I would have no use for such a thing," he declared, then looked coldly at Javier. "All I'll take is your time." "My time?" Javier scowled. It seemed like a strange request. In exchange for something so wonderful, there must be a catch. He thought to himself, then said, "I'm already working 2 days, but I guess I could be here after school too." He grinned at the aged magician. I'll think about it." "You do that, my boy," Ronaldo said, grinning back. "And when you decide, just say so wherever you are, and I will hear you." What did he mean by that? Javier thought, leaving the shop for home. As he exited, he noticed that Greta was staring at him. She sure was a weird one. That night, Javier couldn't sleep. On the one hand, more of his time seemed little enough to give for the knowledge that he had always wanted. But on the other hand, Ronaldo kind of scared him. Then he sat up in bed. "What could possibly go wrong?" he said confidently. "I'll do it." "Done," Ronaldo's disembodied voice declared from nowhere and everywhere. "Huh?" Javier grunted, looking around his bedroom for the source of the voice, and then, to his amazement, he saw a small leather-bound book appear on his nightstand. Shaking with fear and excitement, he turned on the light, snatched up the book in his trembling hand, and opened its pages. He read the chapter titles. To make flowers bloom from a stick, to raise objects, to become invisible. This is incredible, he exclaimed. All at once the air began to swirl around the room. Trying to control his wildly pounding heart, Javier drew in a terrified breath as the glowing image of Ronaldo appeared. He was dressed as he had been in the old poster. You have what you want, the ghostly figure hissed, but be warned, if you ever show anyone the book or tell them about it, the book and your power will disappear without a trace. And now that our business is done, I will take my leave of you. Forever. Abruptly, the room was once again quiet, and the image of Ronaldo was gone. In awe, Javier stared at the spot where the magician had been, then turned his attention back to the marvelous book. He chose a spell, the spell to raise objects. He studied it, pointed his finger at his clock radio. Laughing with delight, he watched it raise unsteadily from his dresser. After quickly testing several more spells, Javier finally fell into a blissful sleep, clutching the book of his dreams in his arms. The sun was just rising when Javier woke again. He couldn't wait to get up and try some of the more exotic enchantments. My life will never be the same, he thought gleefully as he pushed back the covers. I won't have to stay here anymore. I can have anything I want. He started to get up, then sat awkwardly back on the edge of the bed. He still felt very tired and his fingers were a little stiff. They probably hurt from holding the book, he reasoned, rubbing his knuckles. But when he looked down at his hands, a shock coursed through his entire body. His fingers were slender and gnarled, and the loose skin on the backs of his hands were spotted with age. All at once, the image of Greta, the old fortune teller in the shop, came back clearly. He could see her holding out her hand to him. Your fate is here, she said, and now he knew why she had made a point of showing him her time-worn hands. No, it can't be true, Javier pleaded. In terror, he raced to the mirror and stared in disbelief at the image of the wrinkled old man. My time, he cried out. Ronaldo took all of my time! Oh man, alright, that one was really, really fun. Oh man, that was so fun. That was super, super fun. I'm sure you probably noticed if you are a 90s kid, I went all the way, like, Sardo, no mister, accent on the dough. That's sawdough, no mister, accent on the dough, from Are You Afraid of the Dark? I just couldn't resist it. Let's see what some comments are. Morgan Moore said, wasting his allowance on, my childhood can relate hard to that. Fair point. Jason Zink said, this is so rad, dude, great idea. Thank you. Rob Field says, what is the recipe for coffee milk? Is it as simple as pouring a shot of espresso into a cup of milk? Not quite. It's basically like making chocolate milk, but with coffee syrup and sugar. Michelle, antisocial. No, don't steal stuff. Kevin Lakes, where can I find this shop at? LOL. Yeah, really. Oh, well, unfortunately, all the malls are closed. You can't go see Ronaldo right now, but soon. Rob Fields, what brand of is this coffee syrup, Ray? They're talking about that. Raymond Brown, that was fun. Morgan Moore, I loved that one. Thank you guys so much. I'm glad you enjoyed it. My voice is starting to give out. I can hang out for a little bit in the chat and just read the chat and talk with you guys. But that was the last story of more super scary stories to tell in the dark. And I gotta say, what a fun time. And this was one of the later books. I think next Wednesday at 8 o'clock, we'll start with even more scary stories for sleepovers. We'll see what this book's all about. And maybe we'll read half one week and half another again. And we'll see what happens. I've been having a great time. And I also want to sincerely thank everyone who has given a tip. I'm serious. If you guys are enjoying this and you have the money to spare, $1, $2 is just as appreciated as anything. Although I appreciate that everybody who's been tipping has been tipping a lot more than that. I really do appreciate it. It means a lot to me. But the tips help immensely while I'm kind of figuring things out. I also want to say my dog is asleep right by my foot, and right now she is doing dream twitches. She's like chasing rabbits in her dreams. She's literally doing little leg twitches. I wish I could show you. Crystal Berry, had Alita listen with me. She didn't get it, but she thought the voices were hilarious. Thank you. Whenever there's an opportunity to do cheesy voices, I cannot help myself. Keith Tomlin, will there be a Campfire Stories After Dark edition? Maybe sometime, but that's kind of what Weekly Spooky is. Only the ambience is better here, I guess. Josh Gianot, that was fun. Thank you so much, Josh, for listening. Cliff Cloyster, yeah, I like the voices. Yeah, I can't help myself. When the when I get a chance to do goofy voices or wild voices or accents, I'm gonna go for it right away. I got so excited when I realized it was gonna be about a magician. I immediately started preparing to talk like Sardo from Are You Afraid of the Dark? All right, my friends. Well, I think I'm going to take off here. It's a little bit before 10 o'clock, but my voice is starting to give, and we just finished the book. I think that's perfect, but I hope that if you're watching this, whether you're watching it right now live or you're watching this on a repeat, please tune in next Wednesday, same time, 8 o'clock Eastern. I'll read some more stories. We can hang out and just have a really good time. And if you're considering tipping, please do. I do appreciate it. But for now, I think we're going to call it a night. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me. I think that it's really important we find these kind of social spaces during this time to, I don't know, to kind of feel, for lack of a better term, to kind of feel normal again. It's really important that we get this. Craig Cohen said, thank you, Henrik, great job. Thank you, Craig, for all of your support. I really do appreciate it. Very, very much. Josh Gianot, I don't know if they made a Are You Afraid of the Dark book with the stories, but if not, it's a good idea for someone to do. They actually did do, not a ton of them, but they actually did do Are You Afraid of the Dark young adult novels, which were basically like the reverse of Goosebumps. They were scary stories, storybooks based on a TV show instead of a TV show based on scary storybooks. Ray Brown, stay safe, my friend. I'll holler at you soon. Sounds good, Ray. You stay safe. You stay well. Rob Fields, see you in a little while for Ouija Room. Yes, so if you want something else to do at 11 o'clock tonight, hang out on my Facebook page. I will post a link. We're going to be doing a watch party and live director's commentary for my feature film Ouija Room, the 16th feature film I directed and one of my favorite horror movies I've ever directed. I'll be giving you commentary, and we'll give you a link to watch the film for free and hang out. So just another way to keep being really positive. Honestly, I've had a great day today, but man, I'm exhausted. I recorded 2 podcasts. I do a podcast with my friend Michelle called This Show Is Awkward. We recorded 2 podcasts, and then I did this for 2 hours, and then I'm going to do an hour and a half director's commentary for Ouija Room. So, woo! I love it, though, and I love hanging out with you guys. Thank you again so much. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for hitting share. Thank you for tipping. Thank you for everything. And please, come back next Wednesday. Tell your friends, like Batman always said, tell your friends about me. I can't do a growling voice right now. I'll die. But thank you all so much. Have a great night. Stay safe. Stay healthy. Stay sane as best you can. I will do the same. Thank you again. Thank you. Sean Denoyer, good night, Henrik. Always fun to hear these stories. Thank you so much, Sean. I'm so glad I could entertain you a little bit. Jeff Berkman said STFH. I'm not sure what that means, but I'm going to laugh about it. So good night, my friends. Take care, sincerely, and thank you again for spending time with me. I really do appreciate it.